So welcome back to the channel that still doesn't know what it wants to be. Before I start sharing what I'm driving and where I am and what's happening, I've been told off by a few people for not asking for likes and subscribers at the beginning of my videos. So therefore I'm not getting an increase in subscribers. I'm getting more comments than I'm getting likes, positive comments, so I appreciate all of those. I love the feedback where everyone has said to me, this is what I need to be doing. In that vein, please hit subscribe, please hit like, because it helps me to be discovered. It really helps me to be discovered by the algorithm, and it means that I'll get more subscribers, I'll get more likes, I can get to 1,000 subscribers, turn on monetization, and I can then do get to 4,000 watch hours, and then report back what that means. Am I earning, 10 pennies a month or whatever it might be? So that would really help me out. Now, the proper exciting news about this video is that I am driving a 1982 Golf Mk1 GTI, 110 brake horsepower, 1.6. It is immense. It is in fantastic condition. It revs like you absolutely would not believe. I've driven one of these way back, probably about 30 years ago, but it was the campaign model, the 1.8, steel sunroof, the works, and I remember just flooring it and it just being crazy fast. It's a serious engine for a small car, and it feels like you're sat really high. It's on 13-inch rims, it's on 175 tires, and it's very, very basic in here. You've got the rev counter, and that's about it. There's a remote thing for your mirrors, but it's manual, cable driven, and it just feels quite raw, but that's part of why everybody loved it. And the thing I've said before is when you move from a modern car into an old car, you can't then be anchored in the car that you just drove. Now, the car that I drove when I came to pick this up and drive it, I was in my wife's Golf R because I wanted to be in a Golf. And you can see is it the DNA? Because I've had a Scirocco, I've had a Golf Mark II, I've had a Golf Mark 4, and now I've got my wife's got a Golf Mark 7.5. And to me, people say, well, you could see the DNA through. That sounds really wanky. It seems really wanky to say that, but being in here, it's a bit like putting on an old pair of slippers. And the owner, Mark, who gave it to me and said, let me drive it, and said it's rattly, it's this, it's whatever, but that's not the reason you drive it, and it's not particularly rattly. It's really revvy, and it sounds like it really wants to go, and even in fifth gear, you put your foot down, and it really wants to go, and it's kind of egging you on, but I like the rawness of it. And it reminds me of when I originally drove one, and when I said I really liked it. And one of the things I said, is never meet your heroes, but especially when you've had a car in the past. My dad used to have an Audi AT Sport, which had the 1.8 engine, which would have come from the Golf GTI campaign and Mark II, the 8-valve one. And that was a great engine, and I loved driving that car, but I was really young then. And all the things that I appreciated about it then are in this car. And I had a Scirocco about 6 years ago, a Mark 1 Storm, and this car reminds me of that, because the way that it drives, obviously you're sat much higher up. In the Scirocco, you're sat really low down, but in this, the way that you're driving, the way that the car feels, the noise, the revving, how it goes up and down the road, how it moves, is amazing. And my Scirocco had 14-inch campaign P-slot tires on, but this one is standard. It's completely, apart from a more modern Bluetooth type but classic looking stereo, it's very, very standard. And the brakes, you have to press them harder. The steering, it doesn't have any power steering, and yet it revs effortlessly. I've not put my foot down in second, which is my favorite gear in these old cars, but third, it's effortless. And I know it doesn't weigh anything, and you're sat high up. It kind of reminds me the same as when I drove my friend's Polo bread van, which had the modern Polo 1.6 GTI engine in. Now that was obviously much more responsive because it's a much more modern engine, much more powerful in a body that weighs nothing. Whereas this, it's standard. And to think that, you know, you could go out and buy a car like this in the 80s and the 90s, and it, because in the 90s, I mean, you'd buy it secondhand, but that it gave you this feeling. And in the early 90s, no one really wanted these. They were the hot hats that everyone wanted to steal, and all the boy racers had them, and they were modified to hell. But cars like this survived, and this one, you know, Mark said it's all rattly, but it's not rattly at all. It's great. And this is the thing, don't get anchored into the last car you drove. It's, you know, my Golf R, my wife's Golf R, Mark 7.5, you know, 300 brake horsepower, 0 to 60 in 4 point something seconds. It's the DSG, all the mod cons, comfortable, reliable, cruiser, crazy performance, but this isn't that, and it doesn't pretend to be that. And when I get in this car, I forget all of that. I forget that because it's got nothing to do with this. And being in this car, all the things about, you know, the way it bounces over the bumps, the way the engine sounds, the noise, the road noise, the fact that you're sat so high up and you're just surrounded by glass. I mean, look how low that door is there. And you know, I've not gone in the right gear, but in first, just the way it revs, and I don't want to push it too hard because it's not my car. The second, you know, it will fly to 6,000 revs, and we're doing 60 already. And it's just, I could drive this car a really long distance. Apart from the fact it's baking hot today, baking, it's like 28 degrees outside. But I love it. And for anyone who has a car like this, you could easily drive it every day. In terms of reliability, comfort, you don't need the mod cons. You know, what do you need? Air conditioning? Yes, I'd want air conditioning. Apparently you can retrofit it in these, because there was an option where you could get air conditioning. That was in the 70s, but you can actually, and it was sold in a way that you could then retrofit it to your cars. So I wonder if you can, I don't know that for sure, but well, it's a Ferrari. I wonder if you can, is that 560? I wonder if you can get air conditioning that would fit this car. But already I feel really comfortable driving it. You know, the accelerator's a bit sensitive, the biting point's a little bit higher, but it idles awesome at 800. It's obviously a well sorted one. It's in immaculate condition. It's not covered in rust. It's clean. It's the cleanest car I've driven in absolutely ages. I mean, the roof lining, the door cards, the dash, the seats. This car has 135,000, almost 136,000 miles, and the seats, the bolster isn't worn. Obviously, it's sun faded. You expect that, because anything else, people would go, well, actually, that's had replacement interior upholstery, whereas this hasn't, and it's got that slight patina about it that says it's an older car, but at the same time everything's complete, everything's together. And the way that it drives, obviously there's that slight, the way that it rocks a little bit because it's so high, and the suspension isn't rock solid, but it's firm. It's firm enough for you to go take a bend like I'm doing now, in a fairly sprightly, spirited way. You could take that bend. But in terms of just, you know, the temperature is rock solid. The only thing is, obviously in the winter, in this country, in the UK, if you drove it, there'd be salt on the roads, it would rust away in no time. And there are things that you can do to mitigate that. You know, you can go and get it treated in a way and then get it checked out, checked every year. That would stop structurally it rusting, but the paint would fade because remember, you know, it's 40-year-old paint. It's the lower sills where any water got in and sat in the winter and it doesn't dry, and it's got salt in that water, then it will rust from inside out. And you know, so every few years you'd be looking at, hang on, I'm gonna have to get some welding done. But if you've got it in this condition, why would you do that? You could drive it 6 months of the year, every single day, and just the joy that you'd get from it, much like, you know, I'm a little bit more calmer. I've spent a bit of time looking around it, because I got a bit too excited when I drove that Polo Bread van, and I couldn't properly articulate what I was thinking. Whereas this, it's a tiny car. I'm doing 70 miles an hour. It doesn't feel like it. It's cruising along. It's in 5th gear, and that's just the usability of it. But we're gonna talk about the fun factor in a second, and how amazing it feels just to be able to drive a car like this. I mean, if somebody drove like the Golf R, motorcyclist coming at speed, so just take me, making a lot of noise in his camo trousers. But if somebody like my wife, who drives a Golf R, which is what, 3 or 4 years old, and she got in this, at first obviously she would go, well, it's rattly, it's this, it's that, why am I driving it, why aren't I driving a modern car, and, you know, the brakes aren't as good, it's not as safe, the performance, all of that. But I think even someone like that would look at it and go, hang on, but it just provides a whole different form of fun, that a car like a modern Golf or a modern car of any sort of type can't really match. And I'm just always taken aback by how amazing it feels to be driving a car like this when there's not enough people shouting about them. I know there are on forums, and there might be some videos on YouTube, which I've not looked at actually, because I didn't want to be just saying the same things that they're saying, and I'm just a little bit more excited about. I'm not going to talk about, you know, the performance. You know, it does 0 to 16 what, 8 or 9 seconds, probably 9.2 seconds or something, I don't know, and it's got 110 brake horsepower, but those things are just incidental. It's more just about, I mean, it's just that noise it makes. It's a little slight kind of almost, van's about to take me out, fizzing noise. Right, the van is in the way, so I can't put my foot down. Let's see. I mean, it just literally wants to keep going. The noise is, it's not noisy, yet it is noisy, but it's a nice noise. That makes sense, right? But when I put my foot down, the revs just start climbing, the speed's climbing. Overtake the van. And it's just, oh my goodness. Honestly, just how, how it climbs through the revs, through the speed, and just, you'd never have a problem keeping up with modern traffic. Obviously you'd have a problem keeping up with modern performance cars, but why would you want to do that? That's not what it's about. You don't just go and say, I'm gonna, you know, put a whatever engine in there, a Corrado or a VR6 or some kind of modern engine. Why would you, when this engine provides so much fun, and it's fairly efficient as well. You get really great miles per gallon. I just think it's one of those cars that they command a serious amount of money now, and I have done for quite a few years, but they don't really have the profile, and, you know, because they're still tainted by, much like things like the Boxster, which I talk about quite a lot, is tainted by what Clarkson said about it not being a great car in its own right, because it's always on the spectrum of Porsche and the desirability, and it's, you know, people wanting to go to a 911, but it's a poor man's step up to a 911. It's no longer that. It never was that, and it just had that stigma attached to it. Whereas these cars had this stigma attached to it. It's a boy racer car. But now, when you think about it, it's people like me who are driving them, who saw them around in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s as kids. People driving them around, people hearing around in them, and now saying, do you know what? that's a car of my youth. That was a car I wanted back then, and now I want more. And I would certainly, if you get the chance to drive one, I would say just go ahead and do it. And it's not a proper review. It's not a review where people talk about, you know, build quality or anything like that, because all of that stuff's been done a million times over. This is just me rambling on, I guess, jumping in it. Also, I've got toothache today. Woke up with toothache. I need to go and sort that out. Yeah. Alright, so I'm back, and you never guess what just happened. I'm driving a Golf Mk1 GTI, an amazing condition one, and the camera overheated, and my camera came up with a thermometer logo. It just went and went off. The car says it's 30 degrees outside, so obviously I was in that car and it didn't have air conditioning, and it was baking. I mean, baking, and I was sweating. I could feel the sweat going down the back of my legs. So the owner of the car had driven so far to bring the car to me, and then the camera overheated. Anyway, just to finish off what I was saying, and I know a lot of people are going to listen to that and go, you don't know anything, you're not quoting, you get the right figures, this, that, whatever, but it wasn't about that. It was just about driving it after driving the Golf R, and just going, you know, just what's the raw experience like, not quoting 0 to 60s and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed it, and just it was so smooth. The power delivery, it's not as raw as you might think, and yes, it is, there's bits of it are raw, it's unrefined, it's a bit, people might say agricultural, but it's not really. It's still a German car. It's got, you know, the electronic, Jetronic, Bosch, whatever, fuel injection, so it's reliable as hell. And I really enjoyed it. So I want to finish this video. I want to keep it short, and hopefully I'm not going to get loads of abuse for not being, you know, knowing everything there is to know about a Mk1 Golf GTI. But I really enjoyed the drive, and thank you to Mark who brought it down and let me drive it. I really appreciated that. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare for it, so I didn't do tons of reading and who designed it. I know who designed it. What was he inspired by? The Fiat 120 something, 124, 128, something like that. It's an Italian name. It was the folding paper design. Anyway, all of that's irrelevant. Immense cars, but you know, they're still tainted by that boy racer type image, and now there's people like me, my age and older, driving them because people remember them from their youth and the cars that people aspired to have, and now they've got the money to have them. They have, I haven't. What's this car doing? It's just driving around roundabout really slowly and using the indicator incorrectly. But anyway, as I said right at the beginning, hit subscribe, hit like. It's really going to help me with the YouTube algorithm, and I want to be able to report back on what that progress is like and what it means when you turn monetization on. Obviously it's not going to stop me having to need to go and get a job, but anyway, I should come up with a word, I guess. I haven't said thank you to everybody about the previous video. The word was cunning. I'm going to do that in the next video because this one's slightly different to that. So anyway, this one's kind of outside that, so I guess I should have come up with a word. but I want to save that for the next one. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next video, assuming this lorry hasn't crushed me. Thanks.